I'm Tanya Fox, and you're listening to Fox Talks Business Podcast. I started my career in the corporate world, but always played to my own tune and loved to think outside of the box. This didn't always serve me well with the bosses, so I made the decision to become an entrepreneur. And that little seed of entrepreneurial curiosity continued to grow as I branched out into retail, service, and franchise businesses. Now, I have been fortunate to have amazing successes in the last 2 decades, but they did not come without some really big failures and even bigger lessons learned. And that's why I started this podcast, not just to share the failures, but to show you how you can turn every failure into a success. We're going to hear from some amazing humans from around the world that are going to share their stories of the good, the bad, and the motivational entrepreneurial life has to offer. After all, life is too short to make all of the mistakes yourself, so why not learn from each other? And of course, we're going to have some fun, because as I always say, well, you know what? I'll tell you that at the end of the episode. So thank you for coming on the show today, Scott. I'm excited about our conversation.
Oh, it's great to be here, Tanya. Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit of a background because, of course, you're an attorney, which most people, especially entrepreneurs, try to avoid because they think that that means something bad has happened. But tell us a little bit about why you decided to go in this direction.
Well, that's a pretty long story, and from a long time ago. It kind of dates me, I guess. But yeah, I turned 52 this week, and so back when I was 23, I went to work for a major telecom company in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I was an authorized agent for them to go sell aftermarket products for their business phone systems. It was a great job. I was making really good money, and I'd found a thing in their computer system that would allow me to sell the renewals of warranties by creating contracts in advance, sending them out in the mail, and then they would come back in. Then I had a follow-up system, and I was making just mailbox money, several $1,000s a month as a 23-year-old. It was more than I'd ever seen. They liked what I was doing so well that they took it away from me, brought it in-house, paid a minimum wage person to do it, and sent me to a part of Oklahoma where they didn't have phones to sell phones. I figured out I had messed up on my contract after talking to a lawyer and decided I wasn't going to let that happen to me again. I did what every normal human would do. I went to law school.
Right. So you have kind of are titled as America's legal coach, but one of the things that is a passion for you is getting people to understand that they need to change the way they think of having an attorney or a lawyer. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm a great example for that. I had a little small business. I was an independent agent. I signed a contract with a major company and didn't have anyone read it first, right? And then I went to a lawyer when everything was horrible, when the house was on fire, and said, "Help me." And they're like, "There's nothing medical science can do for you. Sorry." And so I was out of luck. Had I been proactive and treated the lawyers as primary care and gone and asked for help beforehand, I wouldn't have made that mistake, and I would have been able to stay with that company longer. I don't know how long, but longer, and it wouldn't have cost me a lot of money. And other business owners have been doing the same thing to me. I've been in practice law for 24 years, and for 8 years I've done things differently. But for a long time, I played along with the game of reactive legal, and everyone would come in when their house was on fire and say, "Scott, save us." And then we would find a way to fix it, but it was really expensive, and they were upset at the end. So in 2012, I'm like, this is crazy. We have to find a better way to deliver legal services to small businesses. I hired my first business coach, and here we are today. And now we have on-demand legal where people can be proactive, where they like talking to their lawyer. We have half-hour conversations every month with our clients. Sometimes they go longer. They call me all the time just to talk. Sometimes they don't even have legal questions. And it just completely changes the relationship. We're no longer adversarial because they don't pay me by the minute. They know what they're getting, and they know that they have the ability to get good information fast.
And I think that that's a worry for, especially a lot of people starting out in businesses. Is there going to be like, the proverbial clock that gets hit? So what questions do I have to, what questions can I ask in a short amount of time?
Yep.
But you talk a lot too about some questions to ask about, there's a lot of people, like you said, that will sign a contract because it's a bigger company. They don't know any better. And then of course, after the signature goes on, they have sort of that signer's remorse. So talk to us a little
Right.
bit about that, because I think that's something everybody's gone through.
Yeah, in my book, 8 Questions to Eliminate Signer's Remorse, we go through some of those questions. And what I've found, Tanya, is that it's the really easy, small stuff that everyone's messing up on. It's not security violations and really complex corporate UCC issues. It's the simple stuff. It's like this, like you're asking about. And the first thing you want to do when you look at a contract is make sure you know who the players are. And so at the top of every contract, there's a section that identifies the contract is by and between, or by, between, and among these people or these companies. And so you want to make sure that if you have an LLC or corporation, that your entity is the one listed as the party, not you personally. That's kind of mistake number one to avoid. And then that the person or entity that's signing it is also using their right capacity. And so you then, if it's a corporation, you want to make sure they're in good standing. And so you would want to do some sort of a search on the computer and make sure that they're in good standing with their state, so that you know that you're dealing with a good entity, right? That's kind of the first thing, because you got to make sure you've got two solid parties to a contract. Once you do that, one of the next things you want to do is just ask, what are the dollars that are involved in this contract? And then you just go through the contract and just take your highlighter and highlight everywhere there's a dollar amount. And then make sure that those are the right dollars. Is it what we discussed? Does it work? Am I comfortable with it? And if you are, then you've answered that question, and then you can move on to the next question, which is, what are the dates? What are the dates and deadlines involved in this contract? So you highlight those and go through them. And can you live with those dates? Can you perform on the dates that it says you have to? And can you wait for them to perform on the dates it says they have to? If the dates are all good, then you've gone through that check mark. And the next thing you want to look at is, what are the ways that we're going to fight? Every contract is setting up a possible dispute in the future. So how we want to handle that? Do we want to just go to court and fight it out, or do we want to go to mediation? I recommend to all of my clients that they add a mediation clause, so that there's a place that you have to go to try to cool off before you get embroiled in litigation. So you have to add that to your contract. So when you have a checklist, you're looking for dollar signs, dates, and is there a dispute clause in here, so that if this thing goes sideways, have a disagreement, we have a way of resolving this other than having a judge and a jury decide it. So those are some of the easy questions that most entrepreneurs and small business owners don't think to ask before they sign. They just look at it and go, I don't understand any of this.
Yeah.
I want this deal.
The parties and the where to's, and they're like, sure, okay, this sounds good. Yeah. And I think that's important what you said. I mean, of course we want to believe that everything that we go into is going to be, a loving relationship, regardless of, how that is. But yeah, I think you have to, you have to plan for that, or at least have something that, where the steps are going to go too.
Yeah. Yeah, because and a lot of people avoid written agreements because they freeze up. They don't want to do it, and they're doing business with people they know. Especially like in your world, in the podcast world, and the online world, everyone kind of knows everybody. You're doing business with people that you kind of know, like, and trust, and you're like, what could go wrong? Well, the relationship could go wrong. And so the written agreement is what keeps honest people honest. And so you want to have a document that's clear and clean, so that you can go back to it and refresh memories without having to call each other, say you're lying. It's look, I think we're misremembering. Let's go back and look at what we agreed. And if it's in a clear document, that's just so much easier than having to go dig through emails, or, no, you said this. Well, I don't remember that.
Right.
If I did say it, I didn't mean it. I don't remember that. By having it in writing in a really clear fashion, it helps. And I really think most contracts are too complicated. Some have to be, but you need to try to boil it down to some of those simple terms and just make sure those are in there, because if they're not, they're deal killers.
Yeah. And I think that that is the worry for a lot of people, right? Is, if they think, well, if I have to do up all of these contracts, like that's going to cost me a lot of money to have somebody do it. Or if they, are trying to write something up, it's so, is there such thing as being too simplistic in it, if they're writing it in their own terms. So I like the idea that you're saying, of just changing the way you think of it as, that having that person as almost like a team member, as a necessity, a necessary tool in your kit to have.
Yeah, and we view ourselves as part of our clients' teams. We work with them, and we go through a process that we call shatterproofing businesses, so that they can be confident that they've covered the legal basis the best they can for the amount of money that they have to spend, and that they can make some confident decisions and know that when things go wrong, that they're built in a way that their house business isn't going to shatter, that they can move on and correct it.
And do you find that this is something that, you should start off as soon as you're looking at going into business? Because I think sometimes people think, well, I should only start doing this once I start really making it big, kind of thing.
Yeah, as soon as you decide it's a business, you should get business legal advice. If it's a hobby, okay, make sure you have insurance so you can avoid some liability. But if it's a business, if you're trying to make money, then you want to set it up right to start. It's very hard to go back and put a foundation under a building. It's really the same with legal work. You want to start it right. You want to build it right, and if you do that, it makes all the difference. And so a lot of people do, though. They'll come back in a year or two later and now want to make it all right. And you can do it. It's going to be more expensive, and you've been really risking a lot in that time in between, and you may not know for a while what you were risking, because you still have that out there. Another big mistake I see, Tanya, is that people will build a brand in the first few years, and then they may find out that it was someone else's brand, and they
Right.
didn't go through the right steps of checking the name, getting a trademark for it, so that they could build with confidence, and they end up having to go back and rebrand.
Right. Which can be very costly if you think about all of the time you put into that initial brand to start off with.
Yeah, just the time. Yeah, just in the value of your time, it's costly. But if you've already, if you're 2 or 3 years in, that could really cost you a lot. You could lose a lot of customers that don't follow you to your new brand.
Yeah. And you actually have a story about a client that actually was able to save over $20,000 for this. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah, it's an online fitness coach, and we're doing some other things related to the business. And there were some contracts that he kind of they'd come in and he routinely signed them. And he just signed up for access when the annual contract came in, and he had our team review it. And when we send it back, we get them in and then we mark them up and send them back. And the idea is that some contracts are what they are, and no one's going to change them. But we want to know. So we mark them up so we can see the problem areas. So we marked those up for him, and then with what he saw in the markups, he would, if he had signed it, it would have cost him $20,000. So he ended up, it was a deal that they would not change the deal. He walked away from it. By walking away, he saved $20,000.
Yeah, because too, like, I mean, I think everybody knows, but looking at a contract, sometimes it's hidden and you don't really see it. And that's why you need somebody who has an eye for noticing those types of things.
Yeah, and it's also really important that the lawyer looking at the contract have context. And that's one of the things that we deal with here in our system as we try to scale this business, is that I have all the contacts because I talk to almost everybody and know more about their business than anyone else does. So trying to get all of our other legal experts here up to speed on the context is difficult, because if they don't understand exactly what these people are doing, then they may not read the contract appropriately. So if someone listening says, okay, I've got a contract, I'm going to go get it reviewed by just any lawyer, that's better than nothing. But if you don't have a relationship with them, they're not going to know the nuances of what you do. They're not going to understand the context, and you could still make some mistakes. So Establish that relationship with someone that you know, like, and trust. Make it consistent. Let them understand what you're doing. Then they can help you. You know, they can really help. If they're just looking at a document, if it's just a transactional approach, you're going to get some value for it, but not the same value you would get if you have a lawyer that really knows you personally and your business inside and out.
And I think that's true, because even, thinking back in my own history, that there's sometimes that, a contract in and of itself might have been a sound contract, but didn't necessarily work with my business or what my objective was. So somebody looking at it might go, yes, this is sound, I don't see any issues. But if they knew what the objective of my business or what my goals were, then they might have said, this isn't in line with that. So I think, that relationship is probably pretty key.
Yeah, an example of that would be that we have one of our clients is a speaker, pretty well-known speaker, and she's is on she speaks to a lot of Christian women's groups across the country, big groups, and does some work for a major Christian publication. They sent in the contract, and the contract had a morality clause in it. Well, one of our team members saw that and was just appalled that there'd be a morality clause in this contract, didn't know the context, and so was striking that out and sending it back. And they're like, no, that's expected with this company, because we're representing their brand and we have to act a certain way. But they didn't know the context.
Right.
And so it's just super important. And not just with the legal side, I mean, it's with the accounting side as well. Life is about relationships, and the better the people that are on your team know you, know what you're doing, know your vision, know the nuance of how you work, the better they can help you. So don't keep it all secret. Tell everyone what's going on. Get people on your team that are interested in you, and it'll make all the difference in the world.
So tell us a little bit more about the book, because you have a lot of information in this book. So tell us a little bit more about what people can find in it.
Yeah, another part of the 8 Questions book is talking about what are the, setting out in the contract, what are the remedies, right? Because you're kind of pre-planning this transaction. And so what happens if the other party doesn't do what they're supposed to do? We can put that in the contract. What happens if I don't do what I'm supposed to for whatever reason? We can put that in the contract. And and those are the remedies clauses. And those are really important to have in there. And then maybe we want to have a clause in there about, well, if we do get into a dispute, who pays the cost of the dispute? Well, that's an attorney's fees clause. Here's another important question: is where would this dispute happen? In geography, I'm in Texas. If I'm doing business with someone that's in California, is this contract in California or is it in Texas? Well, we need to say that in the agreement, because no one in their right mind wants to litigate in California. They're crazy over there. So you put Texas or any other state, but you want to make sure you've got that in the agreement. And that's one of those really easy things to blow by, and is often negotiable with smaller companies. If it's a Fortune 500 company, it is what it is. But with smaller companies where you're kind of on equal negotiating ground, a lot of times that's negotiable. But you just have to ask. And people are going to send you the contract that's hard and more favorable to them most times. But if you'll just ask, they'll soften it. But they're not going to if you don't ask. And if you don't have the right tools in your tool belt, like you mentioned, you're not going to know when to push back and not. And you could make a bad agreement that costs you, like happened with Sean, $20,000.
Well, and I think it's true. That's even something that I wouldn't have thought of is having that. And with the way the world is going, there's so much more reach that people are working with people in other countries. So not knowing where that is, if all of a sudden something goes wrong, and guess where you're traveling?
Yeah.
And not for a vacation.
No, and it could make it where you couldn't afford to enforce the agreement.
Right.
It could really make it where you can't. And I mean, there's a lot of contracts that we write that it's like we know that no one's ever going to file suit on this because it would just be bad for business, period. But you want to write them where you could, where you know it's enforceable and it's someplace that you could go enforce it. Otherwise, what's the point? But we try to work with friendly contracts contracts should help you do business, not hurt you. That's another thing we see a lot of entrepreneurs do wrong is they'll go to a lawyer who's very well meaning and will draft this really great contract that has lots of teeth to it, and no one in their right mind will sign it. And so you lose the sale because of it. And then they're all upset. Well, the lawyer didn't understand the deal. They didn't really understand what you were trying to do. And so you've got to make sure you have an entrepreneurial lawyer that's trying to help you do more business. As it's important to have protection, but the protection is not worth it if you can't do business.
Right, because then you're sort of defeating the purpose of why you started doing it all in the first place.
Yeah, and some lawyers don't get that. They just don't.
Yeah. Well, like you said, then it all becomes about just what's written on the paper instead of the bigger picture, right? And I've always had that philosophy of, you know, if my clients or the people I'm working with grow, I grow. So it needs to be something that's mutually beneficial. Otherwise, yeah, why would anybody want to sign it?
Yeah, and I mean, and it should have friendly language in it. It doesn't have to be so dry. I mean, a lot of our contracts start with congratulations.
Right. And I think a lot of people think that it has to be that way, right? It has to be very methodical and very, you know, the whereas and where to's and all of that other stuff has to be in it to make it enforceable.
Yeah, no, and it doesn't. It can be friendly. There are certain things that have to be in it, but most of that can have around it friendlier language, things that help us do business. And it takes some time, and someone has to be creative. And a lot of people don't do that, especially in my industry.
Yeah. So when someone is looking, they're like, okay, I need to do this. You know, a lot of our listeners are already in business. So maybe some of them are sitting there going, okay, this is not something I have done. What should they be, you know, what are some of the things that you would say, okay, here's what you need to look for. Here's the questions you need to ask when looking for this partnership that you're going to build?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, so you want to talk to them. One good question would be, do they work with a business coach? If they work with a business coach, then they're actively trying to grow a business, and they don't consider what they're doing to be special and not a business. And that's important because you want someone that thinks they're doing something similar to you, not better than you.
Right.
And then you want to know what kind of other businesses they represent. You know, because if they're representing Fortune 500 companies, unless you are a Fortune 500 company, they're not going to be helpful to you. You want someone that's representing mom and pop shops, you know, that's working with people from 0 to 5 million in revenue, and that's their sweet spot, and that that's who they want to work with. You want to know how they bill their clients, and this is really important. Traditionally, for the last 50 years, lawyers bill by the hour, right? So you meet with them, you call them, they hit a timer, and they're billing you on increments of every 6 minutes, which can get really expensive. And so you don't want that. I had a partner one time that I don't care whether I get to set the rate or not, because I know how much I can spend, how much time I want on it. And he was joking about it, but there's too much truth to it, that you don't want your lawyer in a conflict with you. And if they know in the back of their mind they can make more money by spending more time on your project, there's a conflict. They don't want to admit it, but there's a conflict. Sometimes there's not a way around it, and that's the best way to do the project. But if you can, you want flat fees. So you want to bring them a project, and they give you a quote, you know, for, say, you want to incorporate. Okay, that's $2,000. And if it takes them more time than they thought, they lose money. If they can do it efficiently, they make money, like all the rest of us, right? That's how business should work. Or even better, they have some sort of subscription package where certain things are included in your package, like phone calls, emails, texts, certain document reviews and document creation, so that you know ahead of time, I can use these services and it's not going to cost me any more than what I pay per month. There's not going to be surprises. There's no ripples on my pond. I can access these services and not have to worry about money flying in my pocket. That's the best, in my opinion. I'm biased because I do that, but we do both. We'll do one-off deals where if you just want this project, that's fine. We'll do that. It's not the most efficient way to do it, but we'll do that. And so you want to nail that down. You also want to know, do they work by themselves? Do they have a team? How do you contact them? Do you get their cell phone number and can text them, or do you have to go through a gatekeeper to get to them? Do they use a scheduling link so that you have so that you can schedule time whenever you need it, or is it a call the receptionist, go through that, book an appointment 2 weeks from now? How does all that work? How much, how busy are they, and what kind of attention can you get if you need it? And then once you've done that, if you're comfortable, and I think that's a really important thing, is that the more comfortable you feel talking to them, the better it is. So if you leave the meeting feeling like, hey, that's someone that I could go eat a hamburger or get a pizza with and enjoy my time with them, then that's someone that you want to consider hiring. If you don't like them, you wouldn't want to be in the room with them, you don't want to talk to them, don't hire them. It doesn't matter how good their legal skills are, you're going to avoid that interaction. And you want someone that you would look forward to talking to, that you'll enjoy the time, and that you will feel like has your best interest at heart. If you kind of do those 4 or 5 things, that'll get you a long way down the road to getting the right person. I'm not saying that it's going to be easy to find that person, but there are other lawyers out there that do things a little differently. I consider myself to be a legal coach, because my job is to not just tell you do this, don't do that, but to try to help you understand why we want to do it that way, to help you start thinking better from a legal perspective strategically, so that you can ask better questions, and that we can make you a stronger, better leader, not just have a better lawyer.
Well, and I think too, when you have that relationship and you can sort of have more knowledge in that, the way you're going to be handling your business and the way you're going to be handling your growth is going to be different too, because you also have that, that base of knowledge. So it makes it a little bit easier, going forward, I would imagine, in that growth.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I had this conversation at lunch with a friend and a client that, but talking about the difference between having your own business and being an employee. And there's just some people that are just better off being an employee. It's not, no one's better than the other. It's just two different, I think a lot of it's personality based, but don't go into business if you aren't willing to read books, listen to podcasts, go to conferences, get to know people personally and build relationships. If you don't want to do that stuff, don't start a business, because that's just the stuff you do when the work's done.
Yeah.
That's when you're done serving your clients, and now you're trying to figure out, what do I have to do to get to the next level? Because in business, you have to be before you can do, before you can have. And so to do those things, it takes work, which takes time. Are there some shortcuts? Sure, you can work smart, but all of them require work, and you have to put more information into your head so that you can catch some of it. You're not going to catch all of it, so you have to keep putting more in, so you can then implement things to take your vision to that, to take your business to match up to that vision that you have. And if you're not willing to do that work, don't go into business. It's not a panacea. A lot of people, I find, say they're in business and they're really they just really have an expensive job, or Howard Partridge, my mentor, would say they're slaves to their own business. They don't have a business that could ever operate without them, and don't even know that they should do that.
Right. Exactly. And I think that's it. I think that there's still to this day, I think there's that cloud of, being a business owner is easy and I get to make my own hours and I get to do whatever I want. And then they get into it and they realize the reality is very much skewed from that, especially in the first couple of years of business, right? Because it is that building, if you're not just securing a job.
Does it ever get easy, Tanya? Because it just seems to me like every time you kind of get to a plateau, then you're like, okay, what's the next step? And then the next step's hard. It's a different hard, but it's all hard. And, it's, There's been times in my life when I've been in really good shape physically and times when I'm not. If I'm in good shape, it's because I've been at the gym pushing weights and it's hard. And I am even sore afterwards, right? But it's worth it. And I think being a business owner, the things we're talking about, like this great service that you offer with the podcast, the books, all this stuff, that's the heavy lifting that you do. Plus pouring into your people, whether they're employees or vendors, however you're building your team, you still have to spend effort there too. It's there's just a lot more to it than having a great idea and pitching it on Shark.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that's true. I think there is a difference between somebody who owns a business and someone who's an entrepreneur. And I've always said that, you know, the entrepreneur is the one that's always like, ooh, look, this is shiny and this is exciting and I love doing this. And, you know, there's that excitement that goes along with it. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a constant struggle, but I don't think of struggle as a bad thing. I think of it as something that's exciting. And, you know, I don't ever want to stop learning because, you know, I
Yeah,
was talking with somebody who said, you know, once I stop learning, I feel like I'm going to start getting old and I'm not ready to get old yet.
yeah, me either. I don't have time for that.
So tell us about the program that you have, the access plan, and explain to people what that is.
Yeah, so the access plan is on-demand legal access for entrepreneurs and small business owners. And what you get with that is you get unlimited email, text, and phone calls to me and my team. So you're in a meeting and have a legal issue come up, and you're like, I don't know what they're talking about. I don't know what that means. You can send a text, make a phone call, step out of the boardroom, walk back in, and look like a hero because you now know what to do. That's the kind of access that you get with us. And then we're reviewing your contracts as they come in. So you should never sign another contract that hasn't been reviewed by a legal team. We're creating custom agreements for you and your business for customers. And if you use independent contractors and employees, then we set up those packages for you. We help you with your hiring systems. And almost all of this stuff is included in one of these levels. And right now we have 3 levels. The business pro level starts at $4.99 a month. And then at the high end, it's $12.75 a month. So it's very affordable. It's just a matter of like everything else, you have to budget for it. And you have to value that knowledge and access. If you do, then we can help you build your business faster and stronger than you can without it. And we have the experience of, I've owned this firm for 15 years. I've been an owner of every firm I've ever been involved with for the last 24 years. And then I've been a part of hundreds, probably coming on thousands of small businesses. I've seen them make mistakes and learn from them. I've made mistakes. And then I also have learned how things work. I know how to put together a marketing funnel. I know I can help look at your websites and figure out what's wrong with them and why they're not converting. And so there's things like that that are just kind of thrown in to your Access membership just because that's where we are and what we do. I want to help you with your problem. And if your problem isn't a contract this week, that's fine. Let's solve your problem. And so we're just interested in the relationship. And, I just want to try to help as many small business owners as I can shatterproof their business, because right now the statistics are that like 20 million lawsuits are filed every year in the US. The mean cost is $85,000 per lawsuit. Most people I know can't afford that.
Yeah.
So we have to build smarter businesses that are built to withstand those attacks, and to be ready if we need to pivot and do something different. And so we have some really good strategies to help business owners do that and keep their assets protected.
And I think that's important for people to think about, is to actually run those numbers regardless of where they are, of what it would cost you if all of a sudden you don't have a service like this and, everything hits the fan and now you're stuck. It's better. It's better the other way, but people sometimes don't think about that. They kind of go with I'm going to cross my fingers and hope for the best.
Yeah, they do. And some of it's because of the traditional model has just proven so expensive, and everyone knows that. And so they just see their money flying out of their pockets whenever they even think about legal. We've proven it can be done differently, and we can help you do that. So give it a chance. Because the things that you're risking right now by not having the right legal structures in place are huge. The problem is you won't know it until it's too late.
Right.
It's just one of those things. Like, I mean, hopefully I'll never have a car wreck and have to use my car insurance. But if I went without it, I would find out real quickly how valuable it was when I wrecked my car and ran over a brain surgeon in their prime and couldn't make them whole. So you want to make sure that your business is in a place that if something bad happens, it's not going to fall to pieces and you can no longer take care of your family.
Yeah. And so if someone is interested, they're sitting there going, okay, I know I need help with this. What is the best way for them to get a hold of you to see if you guys can work together and if it would be a good fit?
Yeah, the best way is to go to reiblaw.com, REIBLAW.com/Fox Talks. And we'll have a special page there set up just for Fox Talks listeners. And on there, you'll have a way to get a 15-minute free call with me. It won't be with a team member, it'll be with me. And you can download one of my ebooks, absolutely free, and try to get you some value there so that you can get on your way to being shatterproof. And we'd love to hear from you and hear what's going on in the Fox Talk listeners world and see how we can help.
Well, thank you very much for that. That's awesome. We'll make sure that we link to that on our blog post as well so that people have a quick link to it. It has been an absolute pleasure, Scott. Thank you so much for taking time to, help us to rethink the way we look at lawyers. I think you're doing a fabulous job of that.
Thanks, Tanya. This was a blast.
Building a team for your business can be the most time-consuming and frustrating thing that you do. Trying to find people that understand your vision and your goals, understand where you want to head and when you want to get there, can be something that takes a lot of time. But once you build that team, the heights that you hit are incredible and amazing. But I really want you to take some time today to consider a lawyer as being one of those first people that you hire on your team. Are you thinking of them as those people that just punch the clock and charge you for every single minute you talk to them? Maybe it's time to search somebody out like Scott and his team, somebody who is taking the law profession and changing the way they do things. They're the innovators, and maybe that is somebody that you need to have on your team. I know some of you are sitting there probably thinking that a lawyer is the last thing you want to think of because it's the last thing that you want to use. But I encourage you to take a moment to think that instead of just helping you get out of situations, they can prevent you from getting in them in the first place. It's like preventative. Almost like your insurance. So maybe it's time for you to change the way you view this profession. I encourage you to head over to our website at foxtalksbusiness.ca. Click on blogs at the top of the page. You'll be able to see this episode and all of the ways that you can connect with Scott and his team, as well as learn more about how he's changing the way people view his profession. You'll find it very enlightening, I promise you. And as always, whether you're revamping your team or just educating yourself on something new, make sure that you have fun. Because as I always say, if you're not having fun, why are you doing it?